Okay. So first of all, thanks again for coming out. I know it's a miserable day outside, so you guys are happy to be inside listening to me, so I'm really pleased you did turn up. For those of you who are tweeting, periscoping, Facebooking, the social media junkies, these are the two hashtags that you should use, and if you want to use them, Anijo Mathew and Vamonde, and the hashtag. So these are the @ symbols, and the hashtag is WIAD16 if you want to tweet it. It's a nice way to start a presentation. Anyway, broadcasting. Okay, so my name is Anijo Mathew. I am an associate professor at the Institute of Design, from which we have a few representations. I don't know if you're familiar with the Institute of Design. We are a 78-year-old school. Really, you heard it right, 78 years. It was started by Vamonde, who was a professor out of the Bauhaus. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Vamonde. And Moholy-Nagy and Mies didn't see eye to eye, so they built two different institutes in Chicago, one focused on architecture and one focused on design. At the moment, we are a design and planning school, which means we use the design methods that you guys employ in your field. We use it to help large companies, organizations, and in my case, cities, to build strategies around how they can move forward. So we look at design in a very broad spectrum of the way you might define it. At the Institute of Design, my research looks at how urban spaces are changing. And in particular, I'm interested in how technology is changing and how we are changing because of the changes in technology. So this particular symbol is very important to me. Why it's important to me is because this is our representation of place. For my 6-year-old daughter, this is all she knows when we talk about place, right? But that's not all we think about when we think about place. Place is much bigger than a Google pic, and that's what I'm really interested in. So I want to understand what this behavior is, how these behaviors change, and what we are starting to see in terms of technology and information that's driving this change. That's what we'll talk about today. Okay? So I'm going to start with a little story. How many of you are familiar with this place? Many of you must be living next to it, right? Did someone shout out what it is? Oh, the name's there, but what is it? It's a theater, right? It's one of the oldest air-conditioned cinemas in Chicago. But do you know why it's famous? Dillinger, yes. So apparently this is where John Dillinger was shot, the gangster, the guy who was played by Johnny Depp, I think? See, Johnny Depp more famous. Anyway, so Dillinger was shot in the biograph. So the story is, when we were doing research for my startup, we decided to take a tour to understand how people engage with place and using technology. And so we decided that, Architecture Foundation, the boat tours, they're all, who wants to go on those tours, right? Tour academy. So we went on a really interesting tour called Blood, Guns, and Valentines. There was this nice little docent. She put us on a bus and took us all around Chicago and showed us all the places where people were hung and shot and massacred. It was fun to see. Right? So we went on this trip. This nice trip. She was a great person to talk to, and she was presenting all of this. And we end up at the Biograph Cinema, one of the oldest air-conditioned cinemas. So we go inside, and we're standing inside this cinema, old cinema, right? Like old theater. You can feel the age, you can smell it, you can hear the creaking wood panels, and it's almost like it's going to fall on you. But then she tells us the story of the woman in red. I mean, many of you may know the story of the woman in red. She was John Dillinger's girlfriend, mistress, whatever she was, but she basically gave him up to the cause. Right? So she tells us the story. We're standing in this place. We can feel and smell the age. Then she changes her narrative. She shifts. And the shift is, she goes in and says, John Dillinger is not really dead. Apparently he's alive with Elvis and Tupac and all the other people. So apparently she believes that John Dillinger knew that the cops were after him, and he sent an imposter into the cinema. And so it was the imposter that was there that day, and the cops come after him, he runs out, He's wearing John Dillinger's clothes. He goes into an alley next to the cinema, and the cops shoot him. So there he is, this imposter guy who looks like John Dillinger, in John Dillinger's clothes, lying, blood all over the ground, and people come in and say, hey, John Dillinger's dead, and they all go away, and we think John Dillinger's dead. So this is our story. Right? Here we are, 2 winters ago, brutal winter, snow on the ground. This was about, I think it was January or February, blizzard conditions, everybody's in their jackets, snow like packed, everybody's huddled, trying to keep warm, everybody pulls out their smartphones and takes a photograph of an empty alley. An empty alley. What are they taking a photograph of? What do you think they're taking a photograph of? It's the narrative, right? They want to capture that narrative and embed that place into their memories, right? This is why we travel. This is why we love place so much. Because information isn't contained in our mobile devices. Information is everywhere. It's in the bricks, it's in the walls, and it's in this place. This place comes alive not because there are 4 walls and a window, it's because it's the Hancock Tower, right? It's because it's FCB. It's because there are 100 people huddled together trying to make sense of something out there. This is why places come alive. And this is what I studied, right? But now, what is interesting is we used to think that our relationships were built in physical space, and our relationship was built around these people who exist in physical space. But we have now, every person in this room, I bet if I took you, turned you upside down and shook you, at least 3 digital devices would fall out of it, right? Do you know that USB cord that you carry has a mini computer inside it? Right, the lightning cable, that has a mini computer inside it. Can you imagine how many digital devices you're carrying on you right now? So what we have done as a generation is that in addition to the physical spaces that we inhabit, we have also started to inhabit Hertzian space. The word Hertzian space was coined by Anthony Dunn, who is now leaving RCA to take up a position at Parsons in the US. Big deal. Hertzian space is a space made of wavelengths. It's your identity. So you have an identity in physical space, right? So Thomas here looks like Thomas, tall, broad guy, looks like he would punch you. But Thomas has an identity digitally, and he carries that with him. His Facebook profile, his Twitter profile, his memories, his histories, his daughter, I mean, there's all of these memories that Thomas carries with him, right? As he's moving through space. And this is bigger than Thomas as a physical embodiment. It's Thomas as an information embodiment. That's amazing. Right? And now the beauty is we can see that. We just don't know how to see it. So we bandage those experiences using Facebook and Instagram, but we can see it. There's the Thomas as a physical Thomas, and there's the embodied digital Thomas, right? And what's interesting is we're trying to grapple at it by using a digital. This is how we see place now. So one of the behaviors I study in my research is that of the phone zombie. It's a technical term. Phone zombie. Do you know what a phone zombie is? It's all of us. That's a phone zombie. That's how we traverse through space. What are we doing? We want you to focus on the numbers. Just the numbers, right? Stop there. 1.2 billion photographs every day on Instagram. Can you imagine the scale of that? That's the population of India. 1.2 billion. Every day. That's the amount of information we are creating on 4 platforms. Think of what we're doing across the internet. Think of the magnitude of information that we are creating, the amount of information that we are embedding into physical place every day, right? And yet our notion of physical place is a pin on a map. So the question was, for me, is if I take the intersections of the three things that I study, technology, place, and people, what can I do with the information? What can we do with the massive amounts of information that's being created? So we set out to understand this. And there's precedent out there, right? You all work in the space, you can architect that information, and Vamonde did this 40 years ago. 40 years ago, this guy said, hey, you know, there's all this massive information, and we can architect it. But he was pulling from precedents in print and graphic design. And he transferred that onto the screen. And since then, for the next 40 years, you guys have built on that. And you've done a magnificent job with our screens, right? Information architecture, done, we won that battle, right? Everybody understands it. I was just telling someone that the number of user experience jobs just spiking up. Everybody wants, I mean, they don't know what they want to hire, but they want it for a user experience job, right? They have no idea what it means, but they want it. Why? Because everybody's doing it. What happens when anything is an interface? This is Adrian Smith Gordon Gill, is an architecture firm in Chicago. They went out, do you guys know these guys? Very famous architecture firm. They went out and did a carbon study of all the buildings in Chicago. And they have a real-time interface of carbon footprints of buildings. Can you imagine you walking down the street and having the ability to look at a building and see information on that building about how they're using carbon? Right? Do you know this? How many of you don't know this? This is HoloLens. Or even if I didn't, like, oh, only 2 people. This is Microsoft's HoloLens. Microsoft is claiming that the next generation of interfaces is not going to be digital touch experiences, but digital holographic experiences in physical place. So you could go up to your sofa and touch it, and it would do something, right? But you're not touching the sofa, you're touching information surrounding the sofa. What happens when information isn't on the screen, on a two-dimensional plane? Do you know this? How many of you know this? Shout out. What is it?
Beacons.
Beacons. What do beacons do?
Information connected to the app and it.
Close proximity interaction.
That's right.
Not only do I know, that you entered the Art Institute, which I know through GPS, I know you're looking at this Monet. So now I can send you information about that Monet. 3 feet. What's the bandwidth for GPS? 200 meters. From 200 meters to 3 feet is my information bandwidth, right? This is a big one. Who knows what this is? Does anyone know? Have you heard of a $400 million acquisition by Google, not acquisition, investment by Google into a company called Magic Leap? Have you heard of this? This is Magic Leap. Magic Leap wants to take augmented reality and put it into biomimetic devices. What does that mean in layman terms? They want to make contact lenses that you can see information through. What is weather information when you can look at weather and read what it is doing? Can you see? Are you guys getting goosebumps? Look at that. Isn't that amazing? What happens to information architecture when the entire world is your screen? What do you do? What is depth? What is material? What is non-material? Right? This is what we do at ID. We look at this and we start to say there's so much that we can do out there. Right? And so I coined a very academic word. I sent it to Patty and she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, man. You have to tell me in layman's terms. So we are talking about a rejuvenation or a renewal of the material world in association with the immaterial world. We are talking about hyperlocal materialism coming back because of information structures. We used to think that material only responds to the body, right? So you walk up to a building and you touch it. Or you walk through Kinsey Street and you can smell Bloomer chocolate, right? So the material information responds to the body because it has form. And you can touch it and feel it and smell it. And the immaterial, so you could go up to a wall like this and you know it's, even sitting here in this air-conditioned space, you know what it looks like because you know what it feels like, right? I mean, you have memories of what an undulating concrete form might look like. And then there's the immaterial, the submaterial information layer that you work. This is the layer that responds to your memory. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to feel it. Until the iPhone came about, nobody actually thought about touching information. We were all using abstracted devices, mice and keys and keyboards. We were not touching information. The information was immaterial or submaterial, right? But then we did something amazing. We started to do this. We started to connect the material with the immaterial or the submaterial. And we started to create experiences that intersect those two spaces, right? The next generation of architecture does not exist in the material form or the immaterial form. So you don't go to an architect who builds, so the next generation of architects is not going to be a physical architect, like let's say SOM that builds buildings, or an information architect, like you guys in the room. It's going to be at the intersection of those two things. The next generation of architecture is going to be about hypermobile, hyperlocal materialism, right? It's about, not about information architecture, it's about narrative architecture. It's about taking these structures and building constructs that connect the two. And we have no idea how to do it, right? And because we have no idea what hyperlocal materialism is, I have no idea. I just coined the word 3 days ago. Basically, what it means is that we need the next Richard Soul Verman to emerge out of this room, or emerge out of the WIADs happening around the world, to connect these two experiences. This is information everywhere. So, but we are trying to take a stab at it, right? So my startup is trying to take baby steps to attach those two things. So the startup is called Vamonde, and it stands for two French words, Vamonde, meaning, for those of you who are French, please don't kick me. It means go world, travel world, or in the office we say get off your ass and get out there, right? And what Vamonde does is it tries to connect the material with the immaterial, like the submaterial, in very baby steps format. So I'm going to show you a video.
Place, whether small, infinite, extraordinary, or sacred, beckons us to enter. Invites us to linger. The place can still surprise us. Allow us to wonder. Reserve a time. And want to be remembered. The place demands to be asked. What happened here? Every story has a place. Explore yours. Vamonde.
So remember, I can touch your screen. Remember, we're still taking baby steps. So let me show you what Vamonde is. So it's already out there. So if you go online, you can see it. So go to www.vamonde.com if you will. There it is. So Vamonde is a hyper-local storytelling platform. It's where you can build stories connected to physical place. So how does it work? It enables you or any organization out there to create these adventures. And these adventures are basically like playlists, except they're not playlists of music or playlists of videos, but they're playlists of physical place. So I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she has memories in Chicago. She's growing up in Chicago. But when she hits 7, Emory University's research says that she's going to forget about 90% of those memories. So what I'm doing is I'm capturing those memories, videos of her growing up, falling off a swing, throwing food at a restaurant, and embedding that into the places where she grew up. And then the platform allows me to lock these memories so that I can lock it so only she can see it. And even for her to see it, she has to be back in those places when she's 25. Right? And we're working with Chicago Shakespeare to do a play that happens through the city, and the play uses the artifacts. So every asset of the city becomes a prop in the play, and we don't know which play they're going to use, but imagine it's the Tempest, and Shakespeare can lock it so that you can't unlock it unless it's raining outside. So now, the architecture of your information is bigger than the assets on the screen. Right? I don't know if you guys know Hebrew Brantley, but imagine walking up to Nike Running in Bucktown and listening to Hebrew tell you the story of why he did it, why you are there, and then maybe even a little secret. Look at the third boy from the left. Embedded in a shoelace is a number, and that number is the number of my house as I was growing up on the street. Right? And then you go looking for that house, which doesn't exist. I do. So we don't put any content on the platform. We only build an exchange. So what we are doing is giving other people a platform to tell their stories. So we have a hostel in Wicker Park telling you about Double Door. You guys know about Double Door? It's a speakeasy where Rolling Stones played in the 90s. Who knew? Right? Harry Carey's, you know Harry Carey's? They discovered a vault under their building where one of Al Capone's hitmen used to live. Right? So you can't go into the vault, but you can see a video of what it feels like to go through the vault into this guy's apartment and look out from the apartment because you could see the courthouse to see who was getting hacked. Right? And then at the end of that, here's where hyperlocal materialism comes to play. You can walk up to the bartender and tell him, the gangster's name was Niti, Frank Niti, and you can tell the bartender, Niti sent me, and they'll make you a special drink that's not on the menu. Right? So this is where you connect the physical with the digital. And how it manifests, you guys should check it out. We have lots of different experiences out there. One adventure a day, one adventure a week is what we are planning now. Well, one adventure a week that's releasing now. And I'm going to show you a brief glimpse at it. So if you open up the platform on your mobile phone, what it does is all of those adventures that you like, it's sent to the mobile phone. And remember, we're still trying to figure out how this manifests in physical space, right? So we're using screens as conduits to get to the information, but the idea is to do more than that. And like I said, each adventure is built off these guideposts, and these are digital guideposts in physical place for which the author has complete control. Right? And then you can go in, you can look at the information is structured in the form of narratives. So it's mindful narrative. So it's not a Snapchat. Hey, I was here, I was with my friend, and here's a dog. Here's a dog that I saw on the street. This is mindful narratives. This is storytelling in physical place, connected to those physical places. So we have hip-hop artists in Edgewater that's trying to do hip-hop art on the platform. So you walk around the city and you can listen to music connected to that place. Right? Or you walk up to a mural on Wabash and you can listen to poetry that was written about that mural. So this is mindful connections to this experience. And we launched in November of 2015. We have close to 1,000 users, no digital marketing, just word of mouth and presentations like this. 1,000 users on the platform, close to 3,200 adventures have been downloaded. People want this, people need this. And from an institutional point of view, look at the number of people that are coming on board, already have adventures on board. This doesn't count all the museums, pretty much every museum in Chicago is building a narrative for the platform. Imagine going to the Shed Aquarium and you getting a little primer on what to do, and then the entire city becomes your aquarium. You walk up to the lake and there's a marine biologist talking about life in the lake. You walk up to the river and there's an aquatic biologist talking about what you can see when you cross-sect the river. Imagine adding augmented reality to this. An alderman who wants to take a park and wants to say, and you're walking by, it buzzes and it says, hey, Alderman Riley has a message for you. And that's how the platform works. It buzzes and informs you about where you are when you're close to one of these places. And imagine all the people taking their augmented reality to talk to you about a vision for that park before they get elected. Right? We have foundations that are funding grants for organizations that are willing to build content on the platform. So MacArthur, Terra, and Illinois all have committed to writing grants. We don't take the money, we give it to the partners. That's Vamonde. We'll have, so this is the best. So the platform itself is free, it's open, and we didn't build it because we wanted to make money. But one of the ways we can make money is when organizations and users start to put in paid adventures. So Trent might say, hey, I'm a beer drinker, I want everybody to drink beer. And he might have a beer adventure to Chicago, and he might say, hey, somebody should pay for this. So Trent can charge $1 for his adventure to Chicago. And Trent gets 70% of every download. We are moving to other cities. So we started in Chicago. We are talking to partners in New York and San Francisco. Istanbul, Hong Kong, and Bombay have all expressed interest of coming on the platform, even without any sort of push. So this is where we are. This is information architecture of the future. I don't know if this is the right answer, but I'm taking a stab at it. At ID, we teach these guys that you have to take a stab. You have to prototype something so that somebody can look at it and say, I agree with these guys. Or even better, I don't agree with these guys, and I'm going to do something better with that. Right? So the challenge to you guys is stop thinking of screens. Stop thinking of two-dimensional interfaces. And start thinking of the entire world as your information architecture. How do you architect information when anything can be an interface? Thank you. Questions, comments? Yes. What triggers the sense of place? Right, so we experimented with that. So two things. Geofencing. So it knows within 200 meters whether you've entered a geofence. So if within 200 meters of the Hancock building, it will let you know that you're near Hancock. Right? The second is beacons. Right? So you walk up to, so we are trying to do this in the Pedway. We're trying to build a puzzle in the, we're working with Cards Against Humanity to build a puzzle in the Pedway, where you walk and it triggers the puzzle by the beacons, because it's close proximity. The notifications, we've experimented with a lot of the notifications. You know Field Trip? Have you used Field Trip? So Field Trip will message you, notify you every time it hits information structure. The Vamonde won't notify you unless you have downloaded the app and opened the app, and it's running in the background. So it'll only notify you if you have downloaded the adventure. So you must have downloaded 10 iconic buildings in Chicago by Architecture Foundation to get a notification about it. So it's only daily. But we're tech agnostic. The screen was our first step. We've already started playing with watch. We're waiting for a consumer version of the HoloLens to release so that we can start to play with glasses. So it's a conduit for your company. Other questions?
Yes. So a really clever monetization strategy that you use.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the strategies to get to that?
Yeah.
Like what did you think through
Yeah.
in terms of here or there
Yeah.
eventually?
It's a good question. So this is what we teach at the Institute of Design. So the entire startup was built on frameworks that we teach at the Institute of Design. So we have frameworks such as terrains and territories where we look at human user behavior, intersecting user behaviors and needs and aspirations, and then we build the territory around it. And then we look at value webs. Value webs are value relationships that are being exchanged by stakeholders that are part of that experience. And then we look at where the value webs are cracking. Right? So, and the cracks will give you ideas about how to get monetize the platform. And then we looked at sort of platform strategies about how, so we have a framework called 10 types of innovation. All the IT students are like, yeah, right? Like, so 10 types of innovation where you start to prototype different ways that you can build profit models on the platform. So we used all of these frameworks to build the structure for the platform. And the biggest thing that came out of the experimentation, the prototyping, was you wouldn't buy this if I told you, you wouldn't download it if I told you that it cost $1 to download, or $5. You wouldn't download it. But if it is free, and your friend had an adventure on it, when you go to Istanbul, and you trust your friend, you're more than likely to pay for that ticket, right? Or Good Beer Hunting. You know Good Beer Hunting? How many of you know Good Beer Hunting? It's Michael Kaiser from Gravity Tank who started this blog called Good Beer Hunting. You should check it out. It's the most beautifully designed blog on beer. And so Michael's building two adventures for us. One is a novice adventure for anybody who's interested in craft beer, and the other is a paid adventure for the elite beer drinkers who want to know what type of beer should I try at this moment. Right? So you would pay for that. So that's how we do it. So we use frameworks to build the platform. Other questions? Yes.
So you were saying that it's location locked, right? So
you can lock it. So the author has control.
Okay. So So the question was, so if the author has control and they lock it, what's the benefit if if there's someone else who's wanting to access it, who's not, the instance that you were talking about was, you were talking about your daughter and like having that, right? Like, so if it's locked to Chicago, like as an example, and she travels, she's dependent to have to travel back to Chicago to. So is there a thought around how to solve that problem?
So we have two modes, right? One is the armchair browsing mode, where the author might say, hey, I want everybody to see every information out there. Mm-hmm. 99% of the adventures now are in armchair browsing mode because people don't know how to connect to place. That's not part of our design structure, right? They don't think that way. But the cool thing about locking is that you have to physically make a pilgrimage to see that place. I'll give you another idea where the place becomes an important part of your messaging. You guys are familiar with Ancestry.com? Imagine tracking genealogy and associating it to the physical places where the diaspora started from. That'd be cool, right?
Yeah, that's great.
That's amazing. So it's not just about the narrative being presented to you, it's connecting the narrative to the physical place. This is where your grandfather built his first house. It doesn't exist now, but here are some pictures from the first house I designed. You would make that pilgrimage. You could sit in your armchair and read it, but there's something about being there, smelling that place, feeling it, getting the air on your skin. There's something about it. Another one is, imagine listening to Obama's acceptance speech, which is a pretty historical moment for Chicago, for the US, right? Imagine listening to it on YouTube, or now imagine sitting in Grand Park and listening to it. That's a pretty different experience, right? So that's what we want to do. But it's very difficult to convince people, especially power players like CEOs or the president of Art Institute, to say, hey, you can lock these things. Well, how would people see it? Yeah, they want to see it like that. No. They want everything that's how we've taught them. As architects, we've taught them that everything should be broadcast. We're still trying to figure it out. Yes.
Have you, is there any like locking a message to an identity? So for instance, you doing pictures for your daughter, but you only want her to see
Correct.
it, and so it would be unlocked by her voice
Correct.
or something along those lines.
Oh, I don't. So the only way we are locking it now is voice is really cool. We should. So, I'm going to do that. But we're locking it to her ID on the. So I can lock it so that only you can unlock it, and nobody else can unlock it. Or I can have a sequence of IDs that can unlock it. So imagine a marriage proposal that's built for a group of people, so they can go to different places and so we have like IDs locked to physical, so individuals or groups. But over time, we can do biometric unlocks, like tech agnostic, right? So the platform is bigger than the conduit of the presentation. Yeah, but we are very interested in that. She had a question first.
So if we see the whole world as an interface, you know how people are talking about human connection and just like being, I don't know, like I was reading, I think it was Aziz Ansari's Modern Romance, and I think there's a part in the book where he's with millennials and with like, you know, baby boomers on one end is baby boomers, on one end is millennials, and all the millennials aren't talking, and all the baby boomers are talking, conversing, getting to know each other. So if the world becomes an interface, it's scary.
Yes.
Because it's like all of us in this room is looking out here and we see all the information on the building, but are we focusing on you anymore?
Right.
And where, like how, like have you guys thought about that and what kind of like solutions?
You're not going to like my answer.
Okay.
So I've thought a lot about this, and I just put a Facebook post on this. Do you know the posts that recently I've been getting a ton of these, where they'll put a cassette tape, and they say, remember these things? They used to make our life it was so beautiful when we had cassette tapes. Do you know what a phone autograph machine is? How many of you know what a phone autograph machine is? Why? It was beautiful, right? It was the first recorded sound system. Just because we have technology that we can use at a certain period of time doesn't mean that our lives won't go on and our society won't move on. My argument against the millennials not talking is that maybe they're not talking in close proximity, but they're talking to people who are far, far, far away from them. Right? So for my daughter, 6-year-old daughter, she talks to her grandparents in India every weekend. For her, the 6,000, 10,000 mile difference is nothing. She doesn't think about that difference. For her, hyperlocal means that she can talk to her grandparents who are 10,000 miles away. So hyperlocality is not defined anymore by proximity, it's defined by the information structures that we architect. So I think that we should let go of the romantic notion that, hey, talking to you in this physical place is cool, and talk about how I can look at him and get some of his memories so that it's not just talking to him, but talking to him over time from his past. Talking about stuff that we share over time. Can you imagine that? Where you walk up to someone in a conference and there are synced memories that appear on Google Glass that say, hey, you were at High 2015? I was there too. Right? Did you hear this guy talk? And that conversation is so much more interesting and meaningful if we can let go of this romantic notion that technology is going to destroy our society. For me. That's why I said I don't think you know. Oh, we had a question here.
You have some great examples of cultural institutions that are thinking of using this and incorporating it into their strategy. Do you have any other brands or maybe commercial brands that are incorporating it?
Yeah, so Lagunitas Brewery wants to do so with the brands, what we're doing is we're working at them. So one of the most common ways that brand exposure happens now is through brand identity, right? So Lagunitas Brewery, IPA, so you're plastered with that memory because you see the brand identity of Lagunitas IPA. So what we are telling them is, now let's focus on experiential identity. Go beyond the brand identity. Imagine Lagunitas does a bar crawl through Chicago, and we talked to Karen at Lagunitas to see if she should buy it, and she's interested. Where you walk, they tell you to walk into different bars in the city, and they'll tell you who to talk to. So they might say, walk up to the bartender, his name is Terry, ask if Terry is behind the counter. If he is, order Lagunitas IPA and ask him about the ghost in the attic. Right? Or go to this bar and ask the bartender, her name is Cheryl, and ask her about the fight she had behind the car. This is physical experiential branding, and all of this leads up to their brewery where you get 20% off. Yeah. So, can we do this?
Do you have plans to monetize partners like that? Not just like paid ventures, but also like in that case?
So we're trying to figure it out. Yeah, we're trying to figure out what brand engagement on the platform looks like. We don't want advertisements. Let's make something clear until someone like Eric Schmidt comes and says, hey, you have to do advertising. That's why you make your $300 billion. But we don't want it yet. But we're trying to figure it out what that partnership is. At the moment, it's free. So it's free for Lagunitas to do that. So we don't know what the implications are. But you would do it, right? Thank you.
As a platform to create content and to then hold that content in place, people let them look at it. So
Yes.
it's still in the realm of Vermont. So
Yes.
how do you get that code?
Correct. Yeah, so I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know. And that's the question I'm posing to you guys. I don't know what this means for the law. First, Vamonde is an open platform. The APIs will be available for people to plug in. Over time, websites, CNN could come in and say, that'd be great. CNN comes in and says, hey, what are all the local narratives in Chicago? And they can plug in and pull out the local narratives. So it will be an open platform. But where it goes beyond Vamonde, so it's for us as a community. So at ID, we say this, right? What do professors do? What do you pay money to go to four-year universities? There's less and less of that, but why do you go to four-year universities? Because we look at the world, we build models, and then we feed those models back to you. You pay lots of money for the models, and then you go and apply the same models out into the world, and it creates something new. My hope with Vamonde is that I actually prompt a conversation that someone else might say, hey, that's super cool, I want to use it, but here's how I can make it better. So this goes back to the platform approach. There can be ecosystems of partners who can take it and build on top of it. So we're open to that. Sorry, I don't have an answer. Yes? Last question.
I have a question regarding content. I can understand how content from institutions like our institute share current can be appealing to other people who are in Chicago. How do you make it appealing for people like, okay, this random stranger had personal
Correct.
experience at this place. Why would I want to relate to that?
So as a local in Chicago? As a local or as a visitor?
I guess both.
So both cases. So the two use cases are, so imagine the persona is a persona. Imagine the persona is the visitor, the tourist that's coming into Chicago. So the structure of the persona is, I'm looking for novel content. I've already done the Bean, I've done CS Tower, I've done the Hancock Tower. So you can see that. And what do I do now? And so, hey, I've never heard of Dumbledore, or I've never heard of Humboldt Park. I went, wait, there's like all of these things that you can do around Humboldt Park. So let's go and see the neighborhood. Or, for example, Edgemont, or Avonlea, Revolution Brewery, right? Anything, right? You could think of anything. That's the more easy narrative, and the tourists are our beachhead consumer, which means that's the people that we are hitting first. The locals come on as creators of content because they want to broadcast their stories. But as more locals come on board, other locals are interested in their stories. If we had an experience where the street artists, we're working with the National Museum of Mexican Art to capture narratives from the street artists in Pilsen and had narratives on there, Or we have a narrative called Lost Murals of Chicago, which were murals like the Wall of Respect, which were civil activism murals that were erased over time. If it told you about those stories, about your own cities, not from the museums, but from local experts, that's interesting, right? Because my grandfather may have painted that mural, and I may have a video interview with that person, which is more interesting than the curator at the art institute telling me that story. So that's what we hope will happen, is that over time the content will tip over into more user-generated. And you're right, there could be, YouTube has cat videos and TED Talks. I'm not judging what you see, what you watch, but it does exist. And it's open to you to decide whether you want the cat videos or whether you want the TED Talks, or both at the same time. TED Talks about cat videos. Yeah, so eventually we'll have a rating system. Yeah, so people can push things up. And we also highlight the authors. So you might say, so I might say, Kareem is, I love what Kareem does, so I'm just going to follow him. Or Waldorf Astoria might have a channel, we're working with Waldorf, might have a channel for high net worth adventures. Like, what do rich people do in Chicago? Yeah. I think that was the last question. Right? So I'm happy to talk to you.